Hi there all, and welcome to my next modern game review. Today I'm going to review Banished, which was released for PC on February 18th, 2014. It is a city building game that was developed and published by Shining Rock Software. What's interesting about this game is that it was created by one developer. Yes, that's right, one developer, since its inception back in 2013, which is an incredible feat, by the way. Of course, there is a second person who worked on it by doing the game's music and game testing, so that's cool too. Anyway, I heard about this game back in 2014, but never quite thought about buying it due to external issues. Until now, which was 2020. So, I finally decided to buy this game and to play it right away. And yes, I know that I'm late in reviewing this game by 2023, but I'm gonna go ahead and review it anyway. I've heard that the reception in this game is relatively mixed, but I'd like to see what it was like through my own eyes. So, let's go ahead, build shelters for the citizens, survive through the harshest of weather and seasons, farm the land, or harvest wild food, and build our way straight into city building. So, let's begin with the game's graphics, which look relatively nice from the distance, although I've noticed upon close examination that the character models for the citizens don't look very lifelike, and sometimes are irritating to see with their low texture quality. So yeah, it's not appealing to see the models for the citizens at a moment's notice, but other than that, the game's terrain is still pretty good even by today's standards. Next is that there's no voice acting in this game, which is disappointing. Though, to be fair, this is a city building game after all, and I don't think it's necessary to include any voice lines anyway. Also, next is the music in this game, which sounds a little too modern with little variety in between, which isn't bad, but it's not widely amazing either. The only two songs I could think of that weren't a good enough reception is the song for the main menu, and the opera type of soundtrack with an interesting flute tune along the old-fashioned drum beat part. Other than that, the rest of the music in this game is either somewhere around mediocre to decent at best, with minimal effort thrown in there. And let's not forget about the sound effects in this game, which sound really practical. For example, the sounds of a woodcutter chopping down trees. Although it can get a little confusing with, say, for example, the pickaxing sound effect of iron and stone sounding similar to each other at first glance. Overall though, they still work just the way they intend to, and I don't mind about it too much. So, moving on, which is that there's no in-game storyline, which is not a good thing. And well, the only story I could think of about this game in general is that you take control of a few families worth of citizens that have been banished, hence the title, from somewhere to an empty landscape untouched by man, and you must build a new settlement in order to survive. Yeah, that's basically the whole plot of Banished, which is pretty much what it is. And the only way you can do is to create your own story by creating a town as you see fit. So yeah, there's nothing really special or unique about this game anyway, other than building what you want to build for your townspeople to flourish or die off. Next is the gameplay itself. And although Banished plays like a city building game on the surface level, it actually functions more like a survival game than most other typical city builder games, where you must keep your citizens alive by having them do tasks like finding food, building houses, creating warm clothes, turning logs into firewood in addition to mining coal for warmth, maintain people's happiness by building important buildings such as chapels, cemeteries, and taverns, and keeping the townspeople healthy by providing them with herbs and herbalists, and curing diseases in hospitals by going to your physician, or your town will collapse in on itself if you're not providing them with enough basic needs for the longest periods of time. So yeah, This game will actively punish you for not managing your community correctly. So that means it doesn't play like any other city building game, including the ones developed by Impressions games like, for example, Feral. And I've heard the developer of Banished mention Untitled as its inspiration for creating this game. Although I haven't played a single Untitled game in existence, and I can't really say anything about those particular games or the series in general due to lack of familiarity. Anyway, there are 3 difficulty settings in this game, which are easy, medium, and hard. Let's talk about easy difficulty, which has you begin with 6 families having houses already built for your townspeople, a barn, lots of resources, every crop seed imaginable, and animals to pasteurize, which is more than enough to grow your community productively. Next is medium difficulty, which has you start with 5 families, an already built barn, and a stockpile filled with medium-sized amounts of resources plentiful for few buildings, in addition to some crop seeds available to you, enough to grow your community if you're productive. And finally, hard difficulty, which has you start with 4 families, a cart with limited resources to spare, and no crop seeds available for farm growth, which is not enough to grow your community quickly. But you definitely gotta be extra productive in keeping your citizens alive at all costs by developing the town quickly, albeit at a little slower pace than usual compared to the other 2 previous difficulties. By the way, I wanted to let you all know that I'm actually playing this game on medium difficulty, and I'm not going to show any footage of Banished on easy mode or hard mode. So yeah, moving on. All of the maps in this game can be randomly generated by inserting a seed number of your choice, which is fine. Although sometimes a few of the maps that I played through before aren't all that impressive design-wise, and the problem is wherever I try placing a building down, I get this little obstacle that's in the way, and I ended up with a somewhat of a poorly built town. So yeah, it's kind of annoying to see it happen, but I don't mind too much about it. So anyway, moving on. There are disasters in this game, which are tornadoes, fires, pest infestations, and livestock diseases. All of these disasters can be turned on or off in the new game options lobby, but I just don't like to leave it on since they're pretty much constantly in the way, and you can't really tell when it'll happen or if the odds are turned against you. So yeah, I don't like this extra bit of challenge of seeing my town getting destroyed by natural disasters, but your knowledge may vary on that one. If you're struggling with how to play this game, there is a tutorial where it teaches you, the player, how Banished works, from building houses to production buildings and trading. I find this tutorial really nice and helpful for beginner players like myself, although it can get a little bit boring or mildly frustrating if you're unable to proceed to the next phase of the tutorial on 1 or 2 occasions. For example, figuring out how trading works or learning how to remove resources. Thankfully, the game's tutorial is relatively short, fairly easy to do with its simple yet fantastic UI, despite its limited options. And it's completely optional. So, there's no need to feel mad about it once you get the hang of it, and learning how to survive by understanding the mechanics of these buildings. You're good to go. Anyway, there are farms in this game, and it is nice to have them, Although I did have some trouble with the mechanic due to its unpredictable behavior, such as giving the townspeople some weird set of unhappiness that I can't even remotely rectify or fix so easily. And whenever I try to diversify the farm sets to different crops each year, it didn't help one bit, and I found out that it's a complete waste of time to do it anyway. What's even worse is farms will fail completely from unpredictable weather, which I will get into in a moment. Pastures have more or less the same problem as farms, and I'm gonna stick to gathering food from wildlife instead of producing crops or farm animals through conventional farming methods in this game. And, well, come to think of it, I actually find that it's much better to gather food from gatherers' huts, hunting cabins, and fishing docks than, say, farms or pastures, since they actually help you flourish your town a lot quicker and better in the long run overall. As mentioned earlier in my review about farms, they have the worst kinds of disasters, including unpredictable weather, which are cold winters, dry summer seasons, and yes, even pest infestations, which cause your farmers' overall happiness to plummet completely to the ground. Also, pastures cause livestock diseases, which too cause your herders' overall happiness to plummet completely to the ground as well. So yeah, I'm gonna avoid farming and animal pasteurization altogether though, and instead stick to gathering food from wildlife forests, lakes, and rivers for the majority of my time playing through this game. Anyway, digging deeper into how these buildings work than I said previously in my review, I'm gonna expand upon it by starting with the gatherer's hut, which sends out gatherers to harvest foods in wild forests such as berries, mushrooms, roots, and onions. I find this method of finding food in the wild very effective, increasingly self-sufficient, and it's all year round for a long time than planting crops, which really helps me not worry about crop management all that much, except losing a gatherer by accidental poisoning on several occasions through a few of my playthroughs. Next is the hunting cabin, which sends out hunters to hunt deer for venison for food and leather for clothing, and it's more helpful than, say, herding sheep for wool and mutton. Fishing docks provide fish out of the water from fishermen, and while the range is limited, it is helpful for increasing your food production rapidly. What's even better is that you can build a barn next to the fishing docks for even faster harvesting of fish, which is an awesome thing to do. Blacksmiths are buildings designed to make tools for your townspeople, and you can choose iron or steel, depending on how resourceful your settlement has become from mines, which I will get into in a moment. And of course, buying the necessary resources from merchants and trading posts. What's really cool is that steel tools last 2 times longer than iron tools, which is nice. Although, to be fair, I have no idea how long each of them will last, other than trying to guesstimate its time of expiration, and I think there should be a system where it shows how long these tools will last by a certain number of seasons or years provided to every townsperson, whether they're educated or not. So yeah, it's kind of irritating to not have this expiration date system by a time number in place for iron tools and steel tools for your citizens. It's worth noting that iron tools are made from logs and iron, and steel tools are made from logs, iron, and coal. Anyway, moving on. Tailored buildings are used to making clothing out of leather and or wool for villagers to keep warm for longer periods, which is good. Although I'm gonna stick to producing leather for clothes than producing wool, except for buying it from merchants, luckily enough. So yeah, I'm good with that. As mentioned before with mines, they're actually used to mine for coal or iron in this game. Also, quarries are used to produce stone in this game too. By the way, I want to let you all know that mines and quarries are produced in limited quantities, and they're prone to bringing higher unhappiness to your townspeople than you think. So my best advice is to be careful where you want to build mines and quarries, in addition to putting limits on how many townspeople you should assign as miners or stonecutters to prevent further unhappiness. Forester lodges are used to plant and cut down trees for logs, which can be used for buildings, mines, quarries, and firewood, which is great since you're gonna need replantable trees to keep your town growing and lasting for a very, very long time. It's worth noting that iron and stone, in addition to logs, are used to build buildings too. Anyway, there are woodcutter buildings which can turn logs into firewood, so that's nice. There are markets which are designed to provide different types of food and other important items, such as tools for your townspeople, from the nearest barn or the closest production building inside your designated circle area, in addition to providing happiness. Wells are used to help citizens put out fires more quickly than rivers if they get too far away from each other. Even though placing lots of wells isn't all that important due to the low chances of your buildings catching on fire, they are still helpful if flaming disasters are striking your town from time to time. Trading posts are also used to trade with merchants who will provide you with goods not yet accessible or are now inaccessible to the player, so that's cool. Town halls are designed to check the statistics of your town and the inhabitants residing in it. A bonus part about town halls is that you can accept or deny nomads as citizens of your town, which is nice. And there is an interesting quirk to it when you give him citizenship, although it may or may not become a positive outcome if you approve them to your settlement in a less than prepared manner. It's worth noting that only one town hall can be built per town in game. Anyway, moving on. And finally, there's a schoolhouse that you can build and a teacher to assign to your citizens by providing the townspeople's children with education beginning at age 10 until 17, or later, depending on how far away this building is, where production for your educated townspeople will eventually increase to twice the number of productivity than uneducated citizens. I like this idea of an education building for increased productivity, although it should have been expanded a little further than that, like, say, upgrading the schoolhouse into a public school building by starting the children's education 4 years early, beginning at age 6 instead of 10, and providing citizens greater productivity through higher education than normally educated citizens from a schoolhouse would. For example, oh well, I guess it'll never happen anytime soon. All of these buildings explained for this game show how they're supposed to work. And although the gameplay in Banished is nice, it is rather simplistic in its design and the content is really shallow in scope, that you're not really gonna see anything interesting beyond just expanding your town and assigning your townspeople some jobs in the professions menu with no end goal in sight. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward survival game, and most of the game's gameplay mechanics are already explained to you in the tutorials. So yeah, that's all you need to know about the game's gameplay mechanics. I know that the townspeople have the potential to become depressed and less productive, which means they'll start idling for longer periods than before. Although I've had some problems with the mechanic itself, even when their happiness is at the highest at times, which leads all the way to the AI itself. I've noticed that the citizens will occasionally start to wander off like mindless chickens with their heads cut off, even when assigned to their designated jobs, whether it's dozens of hours late into the game or right at the very beginning of the game. And when it happens more times than usual, the AI would suddenly sort of glitch out on you for no apparent reason, where you wouldn't get them to work properly anymore. And that's not a good thing. So yeah, it's best to watch out for any possible abnormalities with the AI in this game. Although the AI will sometimes cause some issues to your town, that it might actually become your worst enemy than depressed villagers. There are still bigger and more important problems that you must always keep your eyes peeled, as mentioned earlier in my review, such as unpredictable weather, natural disasters, diseases, and so on. If you have everything set up already and nothing else is happening, you can actually speed up the game by selecting the simulation speed from normal speed to 10 times the regular speed until your town is in need of expanding by adding more houses for new families, adding more production buildings for increased productivity, creating a separate town away from another town or towns, and so on. All of these options will make the game relatively easy over the span of a few playthroughs, or less. And while it's impressive that the majority of the game was created by one person, from programming to sound effects, it really doesn't last very long. And that's its major flaw. If this game added more content, like say an economic system where you can earn money from the markets or trading posts, which would have helped your townspeople's overall happiness and the town in general. Mining for gold to create money would have also been a great addition, but since there's no economic system, and there's no way you can develop a powerful economy where you can build up your town with any revenue, it leads to another major issue where the townspeople will suddenly start to hoard everything like crazy from many hours to multiple days into the game. And your settlement will all of a sudden start to fall apart relatively quickly for no apparent reason. And all your villagers will eventually die out from starvation or hypothermia. And I absolutely hate that. There's another bonus content idea that should have been added to the game, which is an upgrade system that I've mentioned briefly in the schoolhouse part, where everything can be upgraded, including buildings, beyond just turning wooden houses into stone houses, which is nice enough, although you already have the option to build stone houses in the first place. It actually defeats the purpose of creating any semblance of an upgrade system in the very beginning, and it's really disappointing that it was never expanded upon further than that. Another thing I wished was added to the game is adding new technologies such as new tools, better clothes, extra resources, etc. and made the technology tree system starting at wood, then stone, to finally marble. This would have helped this game further, where you can improve the lives of the citizens through technological advancements, and it'll add longer playthroughs than the normal game would. An improved transportation system would have been a nice addition as well, beyond just building dirt roads, stone roads, bridges, and tunnels for the townspeople to walk on. Another interesting idea that would have been added to the game is an eventful related mechanic such as combat, by having your townspeople fight off against wild animals such as boars and working together to defeat hostiles such as bandits that are a danger to your community would have been an exciting thing to see. And there would be a reward system if the citizens successfully survived the attack. And finally, maybe even throw in some kind of rescue event during a disaster, where you, the player, must save a fellow citizen from, say, for example, falling rocks, by assigning lots of townspeople as emergency rescuers, by rescuing the trapped town person for a limited period of time. And if the timer runs out, the person will ultimately die from the same unfortunate accident, that sort of thing. These extra content ideas that I've mentioned throughout my review would have made the game far more interesting and longer lasting than it is now. But unfortunately, it never went past its original development cycle, nor did it develop its own identity as a true medieval city building game with survival elements thrown in there for good measure. I mean, it actually plays like a straight up medieval survival game with city building elements than anything else. And I'm not exactly a big fan of that. So yeah, it's not exactly easy to find any appeal to this game in the long term. And while Banished is a well thought out game, it's not exactly the best one either. And it has to fall to the mods themselves to pick up where it left off. And yes, there are mods in this game, and from what I saw on the mod selection menu are, well, how should I put it? Somewhat intriguing, but overall not exactly impressive, and some of them came out a little too ambitious for my taste than what the game set us out to do. And while the mod community has picked up the pace since the game's initial release date of 2014, it's still rather small in comparison to other mod communities from different city building games such as the SimCity game series up to 4, for example. Anyway, that's all I can say about this game, and it's time to close this review with a conclusion. While the graphics in Banished are mostly fine, except for the models of the citizens in addition to some of its interesting mechanics, okay enough designed maps, nicely done UI, workable sound effects, and a decent enough soundtrack, it's simple yet shallow gameplay, some issues with the AI, no genuine story beyond just making your own, and a lack of extra content along with too much help from the mod community didn't make this game all that better in general, which ultimately brings my final score for Banished a 5 out of 10. Overall, an underwhelming game. Although Banished is underwhelming, it is an interesting one nonetheless, and I did have some enjoyment out of this game for quite some time, if you know what you're doing. Unfortunately though, I don't think it's the game that keeps you hooked for no more than a few weeks, and the appeal to its audience is rather small in comparison to other city building games before this one. So yeah, it's a rather hard choice whether or not I can recommend this game to anyone, let alone at full price. It's probably for the best to get it on sale at a reduced price when given the chance. Anyway, thank you all for watching my review of Banished. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in future videos. Take care!